Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Super Tease video. And with this one, I wanted to bring an update to my patch 9.2 PvP range DPS tier list. And the focus of this list is on the 3v3 bracket in ladder play. There have been a tremendous amount of changes and additions to patch 9.2, and it seems like they're consistently happening. So if you want to make sure that you're staying ahead of the competition and want those patch notes in real time, make sure you hit the subscribe button, because I do bring that information here in real time, so you don't have to sift through the internet if your class maybe got nerfed off the face of the planet or buffed into the best position it's ever been in. And you can find that very easily here by just making sure the subscribe button is clicked. But to get started off here, I've broken my tier list down into S, A, B, potential, high risk, and avoid. These are the categories I took with my prediction to this list, and then I'm going to be filtering them through based on my thoughts so far in patch 9.2 in terms of their power. A lot of what's going to go into the viability of these specializations is going to be kind of like damage output, the damage profile, right? Does it fit the right type of profile, which is in right now in the meta is burst damage, survivability, as well as like versatility. How flexible are you in switching to different compositions is going to put you higher up on the list overall. So starting with Affliction Warlock here. Affliction Warlock has a tremendous amount of damage output. However, its profile is not really in the burst category. With the changes to Death Bolt, that is, it focuses on spread damage, which it can overwhelm targets, especially paired up with other specializations like a Demon Hunter or a Shadow Priest that can also provide this level of damage and support. And you do see it played at the high level. It has some flexibility and some versatility, but I think because it doesn't have that Omega one-shot, that's what's holding it back from getting into the S tier. But it's definitely the most competitive I think it has been in a long time. It's a pretty good time to be a warlock. So with having said that, I think I feel pretty comfortable putting it in the A tier at the moment. There are other specializations of lock though that may be outshining it as of right now, but its damage output is great, decent survivability, decent flexibility in terms of versatility. So this is why it's going on to the A tier. Arcane Mage, this is a specialization that has just not really gotten to hit its stride or its shining point just yet. It has been outshined by Fire Mage for such a huge amount of time, and now even Frost Mage, I think, is performing significantly better than it. Still the same types of weaknesses, only one school of magic. The play is really kind of cheesy, locked into those Arcanosphere one-shot windows, and its survivability can be minimal compared to the other mage specializations, at least from what I have seen so far, and it's basically just not in a popular position. I personally, and this is my own bias, don't really enjoy the rotation of it in Shadowlands. I think previous iterations of Arcane Mage, like even from Mists of Pandaria, where arcane charges you accumulated for massive barrage hits, or Legion, where you use the arcane explosion into barrage. I much preferred that type of playstyle than this kind of missile spamming that has kind of hit arcane for some time at this point. So both playstyle, you've got a little bit of flexibility as an Arcane Mage. You can play Wizard Cleave, you can play with a melee DPS, but a lot of the times people are just gonna be asking you, why aren't you Frost? Why aren't you Fire? You pretty much bring none of the strengths and only the weaknesses of those specializations. So I think sadly for right now, Arcane Mage is on the avoid tier for me. It would be a very high risk to take it. You would be super niche, but even being in that niche point, I feel like the playstyle of the spec is just not as enjoyable as previous iterations of it to really justify being that niche Arcane Mage. So that's why I feel more comfortable putting it in the avoid tier here. Beast Mastery Hunter just got a recent buff. It's doing phenomenal in compositions such as Jungle Cleave, so with Feral Druid and a Priest. Your flexibility it's all right. You can pair up with some other melee DPS. I've actually seen some Demon Hunter, BM Hunters, some Ret Paladins and stuff like that. Not the best. Decent flexibility. You have that S tier composition option with Jungle Cleave though. You do have a great damage profile similar to the Affliction Warlock, and because of the double legendaries now, you can wear that kill shot proccing one from the Vent tier, which can give you some chunky burst damage with your kill shot procs that the Affliction Warlock doesn't have. So right now, I'm doing my best to debate whether or not I want to put it on S or A tier. I think that survivability is actually something that could hold the specialization back, but its ability to kite and avoid damage it's all right. Some other specializations specializations are definitely a lot tankier. I think survivability is ultimately going to hold this back. I do think Beast Mastery is better than Affliction, which is why I'm putting it to the left. If you're further on the left on this tier, it means you're in a better position than the other specs on that tier. And I think its main reason it's not S is actually its personal survivability, and it's not the most versatile. Like you can work with other specs in the game, but there's usually better options. Demonology Warlock, this is a specialization that I've been playing a lot of. I talked a lot of hype leading up into it, and I think the hype has somewhat delivered on it in terms of its ability to get massive critical strikes with Demon Bolt. You can really overwhelm targets when you are left free. However, getting trained down by cleaves, having your pet as a liability is kind of holding you back quite a bit as demonology in terms of competitive play. And I know there's a lot of people already typing in the comments, but they just one-shot me, which is completely true. They do have a ridiculous, probably the highest burst damage potential in the game, which is great for the profile of the metagame at the moment. But I think the liability of your pet, the frustrations of being interrupted multiple times because your ramp can be disrupted so easily, kind of holds the spec back. I'd say that it's kind of in a dead even race here with Affliction. It's definitely the best Demonology has ever been for Shadowlands. I think it's worth giving it a try. I've seen Demonology paired up with a lot of wizard cleaves, so like Mage, Elemental Shaman. Haven't seen a ton of Balanced Druid for it. A little bit of Shadow Priest. Seems like it's locked into that wizard meta. If you're going to be playing with a melee DPS, it would likely be better to be Affliction or Destruction, just again because if you get tunneled as Demonology, you're not really going to be able to do a lot, and I think that versatility also pulls the spec down. Its overall damage is good, not comparable to Affliction, but its burst damage definitely superior. So very close in the race between Demonology and Affliction for me. And now Destruction Warlock. Destruction Warlock with its set bonuses is just absolutely crazy. I had it in potential high risk because we didn't really know if these set bonuses are going to be crazy. Nobody's really talking about it. And Destruction Warlock actually looks really, really good right now. I'm right now, my biggest debate is whether or not to put it on S tier. I think that Destruction might be the most flexible lock spec in terms of comps. You have Wizards. I've seen it now played with Rogues, Windwalkers, Warriors, Feral Druids. Seems like you can pair it pretty much with anything. Its survivability against some of the best specs in the game, things like Rogue, it's going to be lower, but it's decent into everything else. If you're left to free cast, you kind of have Demonology's potential on maybe 20% less on the top end of burst, but it's more available. You can just constantly be spamming out damage with Chaos Bolts. It seems like that potential high risk really did actually pay off if you went with the Destruction Warlock here, if you've been investing your stocks in it and wanted to make a run with it. I'm just really trying to, I think Mage Lock is one of the best comps in the game, Destruction being the best specialization with maybe some flex to Affliction or Demo in specific instances. But overall, I think I'm going to be putting it on the S tier at the moment because I think that it's flexible, has decent survivability outside of some outliers, right? Things like Rogue Mage Priest, which everybody struggles with. I think its survivability is decent with Dark Pact while stunned, on any resolve with lower cooldown on the Conduit, your mobility with Portal. If you go Alliance and you play Dwarf to try and counter some of those Assassination Rogues and types of compositions like that, Feral Druids, I think having the Stone Form to remove bleeds is great for you. Your damage profile is perfect for what needs to be done at the moment. You have a lot of instant crowd control now with those set bonuses. I think I actually feel comfortable putting it up here, and it was here before this in my prediction video. Elemental Shaman, decent damage profile, much like Affliction in terms of its overall damage. Really struggles with getting trained down, especially against cleaves. You have some options with playing Vesper Totem for some cheesy one-shots. I've actually been playing that to the top of the ladder right now as Balanced Druid Elemental. You could just flex it over to Necro, but again, I really think that having the ability to just 100-0 somebody is very important in the game because there's still a significant amount of hybrid healing to cut through. So if the target is just immediately out of there and they can't get a 20k instant regrowth from their Feral or Word of Glory from their Rep Paladin, then that target's out. There's no chance of recovery. So that type of damage is actually very valuable with how prevalent off healing is. We see that in the scoreboards in the tournament as well, with how much healing specs can actually pull off. But its weaknesses and survivability is really rough. Its flexibility, it's like mid-tier. It's like people would probably rather have a mage than you in a wizard cleave. People would probably rather have a mage than you if they're a melee DPS. So you're kind of on the back end of those. I haven't gotten to see a huge amount of set bonus 4-set Necrolord Ellies that are kind of maxed out for PvE potential there. But you are also probably one of the weakest specs for Rogue Mage. So for me, I think it's probably safer to be putting it here on the B tier at the moment. While I think that you can have success with the specialization, its weaknesses, I think, hold it back from the other options currently available. But the way that it plays, I think, is worth it if you want to be like a niche Ellie player. I think that is what most of the Ellie players right now are. They're playing it because they're the niche Ellie players that like to stick with it, and that's for a good reason. You're just you're really close. Honestly, I feel like Ellie is really close in terms of getting there. Did just get that recent 5% damage buff, which maybe that shifts my opinion. Maybe it gets a couple more, and then it's going to be able to get up into that bracket. But breaking that threshold in terms of burst damage, other than playing the Vesper Totem, which if you're getting tunneled again can be countered. I think that it's probably coming a little bit lower. Someone in the comments is going to say that I got some type of bias towards Elemental and not wanting it to get nerfed. So maybe we jump it up. Am I being biased in my assessment of Ellie here? It could be an A tier specialization, but I think it would be towards the bottom end. If Vesper Totem was to ever get nerfed, your ability to end games drops dramatically. And if you switch over to Necrolord again, the same type of damage breakdown as Affliction, it can be tough to end games in those builds. You'll be a top damage meter spec, but it'll be really tough to end. I think I honestly feel comfortable putting here because its flexibility is lower than the other options. Survivability is low. Damage profile is great. Burst is amazing with Vesper, but not without. It's really tough for me. This one's a really easy one. Fire Mage, best spec in the game. I should have made a Fire Mage tier, honestly. Fire Mage is hands down the best spec in the game. Your personal survivability, healing output, control, the ability to just reduce all of your powerful cooldowns, like your counter spell through conduits, through shifting power, having access to constant absorbs when you want to play blink out of stuns. You're one spec in the game that can really abuse that new trinket it makes you immune to crowd control, because you can always blink out of stuns when the enemy team tries to catch you, and then just provide yourself with this massive absorb every time you do it. So I actually think I should have made a Fire Mage tier for how amazing it is in PvP, both defensively, offensively, fits the damage profile, great in Wizard Cleave, great with pretty much every melee DPS in the game. You can play, I honestly think you could play almost anything as this. Like, you could even do Hunter Mage if you really wanted to, and probably make it work. That might be the worst option, but it is the most flexible spec in the game, has been for the entire expansion, and still continues to be despite those recent nerfs. They really didn't even scratch the surface for Fire Mage. And I probably should have made its own tier on this list. Frost Mage, this spec is getting a lot better now, especially if you're running Necrolord. Massive Frostbolt damage, can completely KO a target, decent scoreboard damage, nice control with Blizzard and snares. You sometimes can get caught off guard. I would say you're a lot more fragile than the Fire Mage in that situation, but if you're coupling yourself with a Destro Warlock and running these double spellcasters, you can really create a lot of distance. The only time it really struggles is when hybrid melee DPS cleaves can get on top of it, trade cooldowns, and run it over. I think that does hold it back at the moment for me, but I feel like it's going to be like a high A. It's not as flexible to me as the Destro. I feel like Destro is going to be more desirable to melee DPS than Frost Mage. Frost Mage is like designated in that specific niche. That's the reason I wouldn't say that it's on the S tier. And again, I probably should have made a tier above this for Fire Mage, but it's in this is the best it's been for the entire expansion, basically. Marksmanship Hunter, again, very similar to Ellie. You're very fragile. That's the main drawback of it to Beast Mastery Hunter. You can get these massive chunky hits out. I see hunters running Ventir a lot of times for killshot procs, a little bit of Kyrian. But whenever I see Marksmanship Hunter, it's kind of like you could have just been BM for a safer option in jungle. Maybe you are a little bit closer to competitive with BM in this patch than others, but your flexibility is kind of tough. Like, I've seen some wizards, some like Hunter Warlock, and trying to stack up that massive range DPS. You'll see it a lot of the times in Blessing of Summer, Subtlety Rogue, Summer Cheese with Paladin, where you're just like trying to kill somebody from stealth, basically, which is a very niche type of playstyle. And I think because of how fragile it is, it kind of holds it back in its flexibility right now for me. I feel like Marksmanship Hunter probably comes a little bit lower. Again, still having the ability to just take somebody out of the game immediately is really powerful, especially if you're trying to climb in the early ranks of the ladder. So these types of specs, especially like the Vesper Totem, these Marksmanship Hunter kind of one-hit wonder specs can perform really well, and you can definitely climb the ladder with them. But I think there are significant weaknesses in its defense, and there's going to be significant weaknesses or options in your comps compared to a lot of the other classes in the game. Like, I'm seeing Warlock, Affliction Warlock, almost anything, Demonology paired up in more composition. So it's versatility, it's survivability, I think, are the main things that are holding marksmanship back at the moment for me. Although you do have the Feign Death, you can kind of hard counter like dot classes and stuff like that. So you have some niche situations where you're going to be really powerful. Definitely a strong spec within its niche, but it's limited. Boomkin. This is a spec. I think the original time I ran this list, I had a lot of classes on the S tier because it really felt like these specs were going to be good. I've been having a decent run with Balanced Druid. Again, I've been playing a lot of Vesper Totem, Boomkin stuff, but I did try a little bit of Warlock, tried to do a couple of other Covenants and work its way through. I think Demon Hunter Boomkin is still a solid composition. Just got my set bonuses, so I got to actually run that out. And I know there's a lot of people in the chat that haven't got yours. Hopefully that Creation Catalyst comes out sooner than later. I think Balanced Druid is in a decent position in terms of offense and crowd control, has the best crowd control in the game of most casters right now, and you can pair with a lot of classes. Like I've seen Boomy DH, Boomy Windwalker, I played a little bit of Boomy Warrior. I've been coupling myself with a lot of casters. I think you could probably run Boomy Warlock, Boomy Mage, of course Boomy Ellie, so you've got a little bit of flexibility. You have great damage profile in terms of overall damage. Kindred Spirits gives you a good burst window. Convoke can give you a good burst window. But at the highest level, you're probably not going to see a lot of Convoke. A lot of people just sticking with Kyrian. I enjoy the Necrolord Starfall build. I think that's a great build for beginner Boomkins too, especially at lower ranks. You can just overwhelm a lot of healers and a lot of teams with dot damage and spread pressure because they're not used to it. So for me, I think it's an A tier, probably coming ahead of Warlock, honestly, at least Demonology and Affliction, somewhere close to BM and Frost in this A tier at the moment. I think it's more flexible. Survivability is noticeably lower, but those fast clones can make up for your kind of squishiness by being able to just get really fast clones out and save the day. Shadow Priest, this is a really tough spec to rank right now because it's not really Shadow that's making Shadow good. It's your synergy with Assassination Rogue that is making you good. It's your synergy with Fire Mage that is making you good. You support those specializations so well that it kind of pumps your rank up. You are flexible. I still see some Warrior Shadow Priest, Warlock Shadow Priest, even Hunter Shadow Priest. Like, it's actually very flexible. Great survivability between Greater Fate and Dispersion. One of the toughest specs in my mind to take down in the game at the moment. And those quality of life changes at the beginning of Shadowlands for making your dots more instant cast and getting your ramp up a little bit faster definitely made your quality of life a lot better here. But it's, for some reason, it's the type of damage that Shadow does that seems to just not be enough to be able to end games. You'll top a lot of damage meters, but you'll never feel like you're really the one that's winning the game. You're kind of just chipping away at your opponents, and again, it's because of all the extra healing in the game that I just described, so that type of damage isn't as valuable. But when you bring instant crowd control like Stun Silence, and as playing Night Fae, reduce the cooldown of Vendetta of your Assassination Rogue by a significant margin, suddenly the Assassination Rogue can end the game because they're finding a window that wasn't there before. So it's good flexibility, great defense, has some of the highest damage output, not really fitting well into the burst meta at the moment. I think that one thing does hold it back a bit. And I feel like it's probably the highest A, maybe close to S. Again, I probably should have made a Fire Mage tier, and then I could put Shadow and Destro on S. I think it's probably the best of all of the A tier. Way better survivability, way better flexibility, decent damage output, and the synergies with the best specs it has in the game give it that burst damage that it's personally lacking in my mind for 3v3. And that's it. That's my range DPS tier list here. We've got Fire Mage, should have been on its own tier. Destro Warlock, great synergies. Definitely one of the most fun, maybe the most fun spec right now once you get the set bonuses and double legendaries unlocked. I'm probably going to go to it even from my Demonology Warlock once I get my set bonuses, just to give it a go. And I think Ellie and Marksman kind of held back, at least in terms of what can they do when they're being attacked. It's really challenging in those situations to deal with that comparatively to other specs, and their versatility and desirability in multiple comps kind of holding them back at the moment. And then unfortunately for Arcane, I'm personally not a big fan of the playstyle of it. I think that its performance is also lacking and doesn't bring the edges that Fire and Frost currently have, and its damage is kind of predictable and easy to see coming, and can be shut down as well. But aside from that, thank you very much for watching the video. And like I said, if you want to stay up to date with patch changes, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Check me out on twitch.tv/Subities. I do my best to stream over there as well. I'm doing a 2400 challenge to get to 2400 rating on every class. So if you'd like to join in on that journey, twitch.tv/Subities. Other than that, thank you very much for watching the video. I will catch you in the next one.